Welcome to the Melbourne Press Club. I'm Mark Baker, the club president, for what promises to be a very interesting lunch today with the Premier. If I could begin by acknowledging our key sponsors, without whose support the club could not continue, and particularly Monash University, our principal sponsor, represented today by David Buckingham and Dorothy Albrecht. Premium sponsors, Minter Ellison, Mark Green and Peter Bartlett. RACV, Brian Negus, Crown Melbourne, Gary O'Neill. Major media sponsors, the Herald Sun, The Age, Leader Newspapers, Channel 7, Channel 9, Network 10, the ABC and 3AW. And major corporate sponsors, Telstra, Kelly Hazel Quill and Swinburne University of Technology. I might mention a couple of forthcoming events. On Wednesday the 5th of June, we will have a media lunch with Russell Howcroft, Executive General Manager at 10 Network. We're still resolving a venue for that, but details and bookings can be made on our website. And also the other big event in sight for us, of course, is on the 11th of October, Friday the 11th of October, we'll have the Victorian Media Hall of Fame dinner, this year at the State Library of Victoria, which promises to be a terrific night, and at which we will induct the next group of Hall of Fame stars, including a number of living Hall of Fame legends, so not one to miss. So please enjoy your lunch. I'll be back in a little while to introduce the Premier formally. Thank you. We might get underway. It would be glib to say that our distinguished guest today needs no introduction and may be plain wrong. For while he might be Premier of Victoria, there are many around this state and perhaps around this room who are still getting a handle on Denis Napthine. In October, Dr. Napthine will celebrate his silver jubilee as a Member of State Parliament, which must make him the greatest stayer to come out of the Western District since Sir Henry Bolte. We know that he is a vet lured to the greener pastures of politics 25 years ago, that he has served in a host of ministerial and shadow ministerial roles, and that he had a brief but ill-fated stint as Leader of the Opposition. But what more do we know about our new state leader? Who knows that he was third in a family of 10 kids? Who knows that he is a descendant of the first Pole to arrive in Australia? Who knows that the first Pole to arrive in Australia, Joseph Pataski, had a one-way passage to Van Diemen's Land courtesy of King George III? And who knows that Yumi Stynes is also a descendant of Joseph Pataski? Where would we be without Google, when 6 degrees of separation is never enough? Of course, we all know that Denis Napthine starts the day on a healthy footing. Those with an eye for conspiracy might well have suspected the dark hand of the Kellogg's marketing department in the dramatic events up at Spring Street on March the 6th this year. Who will forget some of the first words uttered by the newly appointed Liberal leader when he declared, "This wasn't what I expected when I had my Special K for breakfast." And I guess we can take it as read that Ted Baillieu would surely have choked on his Bircher muesli had he known what the day had in store for him. But if the form Dr. Napthine has displayed since taking the job is a guide, he may well be making a main course meal of Labor in next year's state election. Already wizened observers of state politics are giving great credit to Dr. Napthine for steadying the ship of minority government and turning back the tide of a nascent Labor opposition with his cool and measured leadership style. It might indeed be early days, but already comparisons are being made between the Premier and other politicians whose talents were not fully appreciated their first time round the leadership tan, not least John Howard, who spent many years back in the wilderness before being resurrected and going on to become the Liberals' most accomplished leader after Menzies. For the Melbourne Press Club, the timing of today's lunch could not have had a better bunch of news pegs. 10 days out from a state budget, 3 days out from a federal budget. Suddenly tunnel vision has taken on a whole new meaning as a rash of big infrastructure projects begin to take more tangible shape. The $9 billion Metro Rail Tunnel, the $8 billion EastWest Road Link Tunnel, plus the $12 billion Port of Hastings scheme. And as debate steps up on such developments that will redefine the physical shape of this city and its future, we ponder the prospect of a change of federal government in September that will have profound implications in many other ways. It's a great day to be here with the Premier. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Napthine.
Thank you very much, Mark, for that very warm introduction. And can I acknowledge here the members of the Parliamentary Press Gallery and many other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I don't know why the members of the Press Gallery are separated from ladies and gentlemen, but that's what my notes say. It is a pleasure to be here as Premier of Victoria, and a pleasure to speak at this great opportunity with the Melbourne Press Club. Mark, thank you very much for that warm introduction, and certainly, yes, I am descended from Pataskis and also descended from Napthine family and McDonald family, and I'm from a very large family which I'll talk about in a few minutes. I want to talk today about my pathway to this role, a little bit about the state budget and the key goals that I have and my government has, and some comments that I'll start with about the media environment. Indeed, as Mark said, that I'm coming up for 25 years in state politics. And in those 25 years, there's been a significant change in the media environment. Indeed, if we go back very further, we can see that there's been an enormous change in the media environment. In fact, if you go back to the last Premier from rural Victoria, the late and great Sir Henry Bolte, the rumours have it, which I understand are absolutely true, his media communications consisted of, after the Cabinet meeting of a Monday, he would invite the couple of journos from the Herald and the Sun and the Age into his office. He'd sit on the edge of the desk, light up a Craven A, pour a few whiskies and have an hour-long chat with the journos, and that was the media stop for the week. And that would give everybody enough stories for the week to go on with. Today we live with a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week news cycle where the news has to change every couple of hours, and there are new stories, there are new issues. We have more platforms, more voices. The traditional media is certainly been in the forefront of changing its formats and being confronting a new range of competition, not only from other forms of traditional media, but a whole new host of commentators in the media forum. And these infinite supply of opinions, blogs and commentators are certainly a very, very much a feature of today's media. And the other great initiative is the citizen reporter. And the citizen reporter is the person with the iPhone, the video, which now often features on our news each night, features on our news pages, but also they are direct feeders into the news cycle through Twitter, through their blogs and through their commentary. And of course, the citizen reporter through Talkback Radio is always a contributor by setting the agenda, raising the issues, and of course they are very, very important in our news cycle. And that provides challenges for traditional media, challenges for politicians and challenges for the community. And the real challenge, I believe, is how we, but particularly the broader community, can sort the facts from opinion or gossip or rumour or somebody's commentary. And the other area I think that people have even greater difficulty is getting some determination of the credibility of the commentators they read. And that is one of the challenges, I think, for us as a society, but particularly for the media or the traditional media who do have a proud tradition of credible commentators, and how we can distinguish those credible commentators who have experience, who have training, who have skills to evaluate what they're writing, from those people who are just making their off-the-head comments. Those are things that were really important. And indeed, President Obama said after the Boston Marathon terror that it is an important task for great journalists is still the same. Fundamentally, to verify the facts, to painstakingly put the facts together to provide the listener, the reader, with a full, accurate story. And I think that's very, very true, that the good journalists, the good media outlets that do verify the facts, who do the hard work and who genuinely put those facts together in a proper, credible story, they will stand the test of scrutiny and the test of time. And I and my government, while we have our differences with how stories are run or differences of opinion at many stages with some of the media and opinion writers, but we strongly support the robust, strong and independent media. And indeed, this government is proud that it's passed shield laws here in Victoria, and we're proud that we stood up strongly against the Gillard government's attempts to stifle our independent media. Our media is part of our greatest strength. Our greatest strength in Victoria and Australia is our democracy, our freedom and our opportunity for all. And that's what comes back to my path to being Premier. I think it's extraordinary in Australia, when I look back on it, that I, as number 3 of 10 children on a family farm at Winchelsea just out of Geelong, am Premier of this state today. As I travel on school buses to the local state school, I don't think anybody on those school buses or anybody in my grade prep or grade 1, in fact I only did half a year of grade prep and no kindergarten, which people might say has affected me for the rest of my life, because that's where you lose socialisation and other skills. But I don't think any of those people would have thought that one of their classmates had the opportunity to be Premier of this state. I don't think many of them even thought that they would complete secondary schooling. And very, very few of them thought they'd have an opportunity for a university education. But it's to the strength of our great state and our great democracy that people from all backgrounds can make that contribution and achieve high office in this state. And when I look around my cabinet, I see Robert Clark, who grew up in St Albans, Martin Dixon, who grew up in Heidelberg West, Kim Wells, who is an Office of Housing in Bairnsdale, Nick Kotsiris from Greece, Matthew Guy, whose family comes from the Ukraine, and many, many others. We're a very diverse group of people that make up the cabinet of this government today. And I think that's great for Victoria, but it's also a great endorsement of this state, which does provide people with that opportunity. And indeed, when one says what inspires me, my greatest inspiration were my parents. My mum and dad, who worked hard on the farm, had 10 children, but at the same time were actively involved with their local community. They were involved with the school council, with the social development committee. My mum edited the local paper, the Winchelsea Star. I don't think she had a journalist degree, but she enjoyed editing the local paper. And they were involved in their community in every way. And they always believed that you got out of the community what you put into it. And I think that was something that was inculcated into myself and my brothers and sisters. And I can let you into a secret here today, that my brothers and sisters, it'd be a toss-up whether I had a majority and it come to a vote among my brothers and sisters. We're a fairly diverse family. My younger brother stood as a Labor candidate a number of years ago. My older brother resigned from the nurses' union because he thought they were too far to the right. He was sort of in the Irene Bolger faction of the union. So we do come from a diverse family, but we are a rich family in debate and in ideas, and we have a solid commitment to making our community a much better place. We just have different views about how to get there, but we do enjoy each other's company. And I still remember stories of growing up. We used to live out in a sleep out, the boys, out the back, And my uncles had a whole, all farmers, and they used to get the odd socks, you know, that were left over. I don't know why socks seem to disappear, but they disappear on a regular basis. And we used to have the sock bag of all the odd socks from my uncles that were left over from my uncles. And when we were home for the summer, and when they were carting hay and chasing fly-blown sheep around the paddocks, every morning you had to get up and go to the sock bag and try and find a couple of socks. And if you could find two that looked similar, you were well in front. So you learn to get up early in the morning, and you learn to work hard and enjoy life. And I think I want to bring that to my premiership and my government. I now want to move on to the recent state budget. The state budget was about building for growth. It was based on the sound coalition tradition of solid financial management. It was about retaining a AAA stable credit rating. It was about delivering a $225 million surplus with future surpluses in the out years. It was about a record $6.1 billion investment in new infrastructure for our state. And it was about a set of budget forecasts that give confidence to Victoria. And these forecasts are from Treasury and Finance, who have a history of fairly conservative forecasts. But they predict a growing economy in Victoria, they predict growing employment and reducing unemployment, and they predict a growing population. And indeed, in the budget, we have predicted, on basis of ABS statistics, that we had to revise upwards the population growth in this state from 1.6 to 1.7% a year, which may not seem significant, but it really is showing that there is a vote of confidence in Victoria with not only natural births, but more migration from overseas and interstate to this state. But producing a good, solid financial budget in itself, while that is good for the state, is not an end unto itself. And I will never see good financial management as an end unto itself. It's part of a way of being able to deliver better services and better outcomes for the people. And I'm pleased in this budget we've provided a record level of $14.3 billion for health funding, including a package of $420 million to help reduce elective surgery waiting lists, which certainly we need to tackle. The other thing that is really exciting about the health budget is that there's $4.8 billion worth of capital works in that budget. This is the biggest spend on capital works for health in Victoria in our history. And a $4.8 billion spend is absolutely terrific. And we're talking about a new hospital at Bendigo, the Comprehensive Cancer Centre, a Monash Children's Hospital, a new Eye and Ear Hospital, Box Hill Hospital, new hospital at Warren Ponds on the growing edges of Geelong, refurbishments of Geelong, Frankston, Ballarat, Echuca, and a new hospital at Numurkah. But I'm particularly proud that in this budget we had special funding for hospitals in our growth areas, including $29 million for a new wing at the Northern Hospital in our northern growth areas, and $35 million for additional wing of mental health beds in Werribee, and $10 million for new public dental services in Footscray, in areas in the west and the north that are not areas that have got traditional Liberal coalition support, but they're areas where the population is growing and there's a real need. Similarly with education, while we've provided nearly $12 billion overall for education, again, I'm particularly proud of the fact that in our new schools program, we've targeted areas of growing Victoria and growing Melbourne, with new schools in Melton, Wyndham Vale, Truganina and Doreen Secondary College. And of course, one of the ones I'm particularly proud of is $8 million for the Western Autistic School, which will be the first P12 autistic school in the western suburbs, which is a real area of need. And yesterday, I was in Geelong, and yesterday morning I was in Corio-Nor Lane. And those who know Geelong know that Corio-Nor Lane, even many, many years, has been an area where there's been a sense of stigma and an area of a challenge. what we've done at Corio Lane yesterday is announce $8 million for further investment in the Northern Bay P12 College. And that comes on top of $8.3 million the year before and $10 million a year or two before that. A total of $26 million into Northern Bay College. Northern Bay College is a collection of a number of primary and secondary schools in the Corio Lane area where we've actually particularly targeted bringing that school together to use education as a key to give those young people in that area greater opportunity, greater hope, greater aspiration. And by investing in making their school buildings the best they can be, the best anywhere in Victoria, if not Australia and the world, we are saying to those young people that you are important to us. You are young people that we are investing in, and we're going to invest in the best teachers and the best facilities in a place like Northern Bay so that we can give those opportunities to those young people. At the same time, we're investing in leadership programs in that area. We're investing in improving the housing stock in those areas because we believe that this is a pathway to change perceptions and outcomes in terms of that area. And of course, I'm also very pleased in record funding for mental health and the continued rollout of our police and PSO programs. I just want to talk briefly about disability services and the NDIS. It's an area of passion of mine for those who saw the announcement of the NDIS with Prime Minister Julia Gillard a couple of weeks ago. It's an area where I personally am involved, having been a house parent for people with intellectual disabilities a number of years ago in Hamilton and fostered one of the children out of that house who's now 37. And you know, Jack's severely autistic, and to watch him grow and develop has been fantastic. And to be able to sign the NDIS agreement is a great step forward. And in this budget, we're providing a record level of $1.6 billion for disability services. And we know that we're going to have the rollout of the Barwon launch site on the 1st of July in the Geelong-Barwon region. And we know that 2016 will start the full transition. And because we've signed the agreement with the federal government, in July 2019 we'll have the full NDIS agreement here in Victoria. That means 100,000 or 102,000 Victorians with significant and profound disabilities will have renewed opportunities, so that people who are 70 and 80 that I know in my electorate that are across Victoria who've got children living with them who are 40, 50 and 60 with severe disabilities who wonder who's going to look after their children when they pass on. We know that there are people who've got ageing wheelchairs and equipment who wonder how they're going to afford the new equipment, and people who are waiting for accommodation, waiting for respite services. Those are the sort of things that we'll be able to deliver through this system. And it will require additional funding from Victoria, but we believe we can manage that because we have sound economic management, and it will require $2.6 billion from the feds, $2.5 billion from us. Very, very important program. And before I leave the NDIS, can I just say one other thing? That we in Victoria are very keen to have the national headquarters and the National Disability Insurance Agency in Geelong. We believe Geelong is the best place for that headquarters because Geelong, over many, many decades, has been a leader in services for people with disability. It's been a city that's been friendly and helpful and supportive of people with disability. And the decision of the previous government to put TAC in Geelong has enhanced its reputation in that area, enhanced its skilled workforce in that area. It is the ideal site. Also, if you're looking at a regional centre, which we're looking at for these headquarters, that is proximate to air services to other states and territories, you can't get better than Geelong, near Avalon and access to Tullamarine. We've put $25 million on the table, and we are absolutely urging the federal Labor government to make a decision in the near future to announce Geelong as the headquarters for the NDIA. It would be great for Geelong, great for Victoria, but most importantly, it is the logical best site for that headquarters. Can I also say one of the other things when you do have sound financial management, not only does it give you the resources to fund important services like health and education and law and order and disability services, but it also gives you the option of looking at major infrastructure that makes a real difference, not just for this year or for 10 years, but for 20 and 30 years to come. In my lifetime, I've seen a number of what I call game-changing projects for Melbourne and Victoria. Tullamarine Airport being relocated from Essendon to Tullamarine as our major international airport. The Westgate Bridge, an enormous investment that made a difference to the whole dynamics of how we move around this state. The City Loop, the underground City Loop, and of course CityLink. I think all of those projects, everybody would say, are really, really vital for Melbourne and Victoria. And that's why I was very, very pleased in the budget to be able to announce that our government is committed to stage 1 of the EastWest Link. This link, which will link the end of the Eastern Freeway to Tullamarine Freeway and to CityLink, with an off-ramp for Elliott Avenue onto Flemington Road, will be an absolute game changer for traffic movement around Melbourne and Victoria. And it's not just traffic movement off the Eastern Freeway, it opens up all new options for people using Peninsula Link, East Link, right across, and even those in the western suburbs and from Western Victoria where I come from, you've got the option now then of coming across Westgate, over Balti and out that link rather than coming through the city and the other tunnels. We are ready and committed to this project. It will be delivered. It will go to tender later this year and it will commence in late 2014. Cost $6 to $8 billion, 3,200 jobs. The Victorian government's put nearly $300 million as a kickstart, and there is other money, our commitment to it is in the forward estimates in the budget. What we're looking for is $1.5 billion from the federal government, and we're looking for the private sector to be involved. And there is enthusiasm across the private sector for participation in this project. With respect to the federal government, I'm pleased that the federal coalition has made a commitment of $1.5 billion. And I would urge the federal Labor government to match that commitment. I found it interesting, annoying, frustrating and even galling that in the federal budget just handed down, that Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan could find $1.8 billion for a very, very similar project in Sydney, a road project in Sydney, $1.8 billion, and nothing for EastWest Link here. The WestConnect link in Sydney is exactly the same model as we're looking for stage 1 of EastWest here. And I'm happy for Sydney and New South Wales to get their $1.8 billion. What we need is our fair share, 1.5 for East West. And the interesting thing is there's been some furphies spread about why we couldn't get the funding. The interesting thing is that on Infrastructure Australia's priorities, East-West Link is actually ahead of the WestConnect proposal in terms of priority by Infrastructure Australia. There's also been commentaries about business case, but what the federal government have said with respect to the $1.8 billion for New South Wales is that one of the things New South Wales must do, and I quote, must finalise a detailed business case for assessment by Infrastructure Australia. So the Sydney proposal has no business case, is lower in priority on the Infrastructure Australia priority, yet they get $1.8 billion for a road project and we don't get anything for our road project. Which moves me on to the Metro Rail Tunnel. And there are some people and some pundits and even some in the media who are saying there's a East-West Stage 1 versus Metro Rail Tunnel. This is a false question. This is wrong. I, Melbourne, Victoria, want and need both those projects. I believe that both can and will be delivered. But what we need is a proper partnership with the federal government with regard to funding and timing of these vital projects. We do need the $1.5 billion for East-West Stage 1 now because we can start that work at late 2014. The Melbourne Metro Rail Tunnel is still some years off before we can start that work. And indeed, the interesting thing is in Minister Albanese's letter to Victorian Government, their funding, the vast majority of their funding, was back-ended, so we wouldn't see that money until 2019 and beyond. So we're happy with that sort of time frame, and we're happy to deal with the federal government and indeed any future federal government on that funding time frame. Indeed, we're happy to negotiate. Let's get the funding for East-West, let's get that started and talk about funding for Metro Rail Tunnel towards the end of this decade. And I believe that is a very doable proposition for Victoria, and we're very happy to work on it. Clearly the Metro Rail Tunnel has a lot to offer the state with new stations, new links for a growing city, and it would also provide additional capacity on our metro rail system so that we can have a serious look at links to the airport, links to Doncaster, Rowville, and improving our overall system. And while I'm talking about myths, there's another myth I'd like to bust here today. There is a myth that the coalition government is not supportive of rail and public transport. Nothing could be further from the truth. In the 2 and a bit years we've been in office, these are a few of the things we have delivered in terms of public transport. An extra, more than 1,000 per week metro rail services. An extra 2,000 bus services per week. We've got 7 Extrapolis trains being built now, a number on the system, others being on the way. And in this budget, we've ordered another 8. 40 new V-line carriages. There's 50 new trams on the way. We've spent $100 million, or allocated $100 million to upgrade the Frankston line. That line was identified in 2009 as one of the worst performing lines in the state. And indeed, when we came to government, it was a bit over 60% punctuality and reliability. It's now running at a bit over 90%. But to lift it up to over 95%, what it should be, we need to invest in improved infrastructure, concrete sleepers, improved signalling, and also, this is an area of learning for me as Premier. I thought the biggest mistake our forefathers made, and they got most things right, was getting our rail gauges mixed up between the standard gauge and broad gauge across Australia. But I travelled on the Frankston line, and I've learnt that the number of different trains we have on our system, the driver is positioned in different positions in the front of different trains. And with some trains, where the driver's positioned, they can't see the signals, and they can't see the platforms to be able to make sure people can get safely on and off. So there are some trains that we can't run on certain lines, and we can't run the new Extrapolis trains on the Frankston line until that line is upgraded with different signalling and different positioning of mirrors and other identification sites on platforms. And that's what we're doing with this $100 million. $25 million on the Dandenong line, and $350 million for key grade separations, new stations at Grovedale, Epsom and Southland, $60 million plus at the upgrading the Ringwood station and bus interchange. And let me leave you with, I think, the other huge game-changing project that's underway at the moment is the regional rail project. This is a massive project, nearly $5 billion, and this will provide for the first time for our trains from Bendigo, Ballarat, Warrnambool, Geelong, a direct link straight into Southern Cross Station without being held up by metro trains and metro traffic. And that's terrific for regional Victoria. But what's hidden in this project, what hasn't been identified properly in the public eye by this project, is that is only a minor part of the benefits of regional rail. The major benefit will be we'll take those regional trains off our metro rail system and increase the capacity of our train services in our west and in our northwest, giving great opportunities to further increase capacity on our rail system. So in 2.5 years, there has been an enormous investment and commitment to improving public transport in this state. A couple of things I just want to finish on. One is the Port of Hastings, another very important game-changing project for Victoria. The Port of Melbourne, great port, doing about 2.6 million TEUs containers. 37% of all the containers going in and out of Australia go through the Port of Melbourne. Freight and logistics is one of our strengths in this state, one of the important parts of our job growth and economy. By 2025, we'll be doing 5 to 5.5 million TEUs. By 2035, we'll be doing 8 million TEUs, which is fantastic for us, fantastic. And guess what? The growth in exports is actually growing faster than the growth in imports at the moment. But our current capacity at the Port of Melbourne, in its current configuration, is about 3.5 million TEUs. So urgent action was needed to increase the capacity of our port, or else we would have to send ships to Sydney or Brisbane, or they'd be tied up in the bay waiting for a spot. And we've taken action, $1.6 billion expansion at the Port of Melbourne to put in a third container dock at Webb Dock East, new automotive facilities and expanded East and West Swanston Dock. But that, with all that work, will see the Port of Melbourne give us capacity up until the late 2020s. By the late 2020s and certainly by 2030, all of that work will still mean the Port of Melbourne's chock-a-block, and there's no room for further expansion. So we do need a new port, a new container port for Melbourne and Victoria. Sir Henry Bolte, 50 years ago, identified Hastings as a natural deep water port. It is an absolutely magnificent deep water port. It's already a working port. It's only 2 hours off the shipping lane, near fast-growing areas of Melbourne, and it is an area that we need to develop. And in this budget, we've provided $110 million to start the work in terms of freight and logistics planning, environmental studies, to get this port up and running. But by 2025, 2030, we have to have the Port of Hastings up and running, or we as a state will suffer. Finally, I'm from country Victoria, very proud to be from country Victoria. And regional and rural Victoria is another passion of mine. And what I'm looking to do with Peter Ryan and my team is to grow population and opportunity in regional and rural Victoria. We believe that population growth is positive for the state. We believe it improves our economy, improves our diversity and our quality of life. We understand that there are some people who have a different view about whether we should be growing our population. Our government is firmly pro-population growth. However, we understand in Melbourne that if we continue to grow as fast as we do, that there are challenges in terms of maintaining our most livable city status. There are challenges in terms of making sure that we are economically efficient in terms of congestion of movement of goods and services and people. Therefore, our government is firmly of the view that we'd like to continue strong population growth. We'd be happy to have a more moderate population growth in Melbourne and a much faster population growth in regional and rural Victoria. So our regional cities, our rural communities, we believe that population growth there will deliver improved economic opportunities, improved quality of life outcomes, and we believe there is great capacity for population growth in this area. And we have endorsed that policy approach with a $1 billion regional growth fund, the Regional Living Expo to encourage people to look at opportunities in regional rural Victoria, the Good Move campaign to suggest to people that it's a great way to live in country Victoria and there are jobs and opportunities there, the Regional Rail Project, which will improve connectivity to regional rural Victoria, and projects like the Bendigo Hospital project, $630 million that will make a real difference to that town and community. The only other area that I just want to touch on briefly is the fire services levy. Again, this is something that I think has gone under the radar. This is probably the biggest tax reform in Victoria since World War II. The current system where people pay for fire services through a levy on their insurance, household insurance, is unfair and inequitable because people who fully insure pay their full tote odds. The next door neighbour who doesn't insure pays nothing, and the next door neighbour on the other side who underinsures doesn't pay their fair share. It's clearly inequitable, clearly unfair, has been known for decades to be unfair and inequitable. It took the Royal Commission into the recent bushfires, the Black Saturday fires, to fundamentally say it needs to change. And it needed a government with courage to make what is a substantial change. The new system is fairer because everybody pays. It also removes the tax on a tax. When you paid your insurance, you paid your fire service levy on your insurance, then you paid stamp duty on that total and GST on that total again. So you paid tax on a levy. And that was clearly unfair. We've removed that. The bottom line is for people in country Victoria, the average household will see their costs go down from $262 on average to $142, and in Melbourne from about $200 to about $140. And for the first time ever, there will be a $50 concession for pensioners and war veterans. I believe that is a significant reform that will have long-lasting effects. In conclusion, can I say it's an absolute honour and privilege to be the Premier of this great state. I'm fortunate that I've got a great team in my cabinet and in my backbench. I've got a great team in my office and a terrific team in the public sector led by Andrew Tongue. I'm very, very proud to be the Premier of this very great state. I'm proud that we've delivered a very strong, sustainable budget, and some of the changes in the short time I've been there are things that will have lasting benefit. The NDIS, the Bendigo Hospital, the changes to fire services levy, the EastWest Link, I think will be a terrific project, and of course the Port of Hastings. And there's more to be done. But I'm enthusiastic. I absolutely love doing what I'm doing, and I look forward to doing it for many, many years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now for questions. Our custom is that we give precedence to working journalists. Not necessarily from their age, but you put your hand up first, Josh.
Thank you, Premier. Just two very simple questions. Firstly, have you had any discussions with Tony Abbott about how the $1.5 billion for the East-West Tunnel that he's promised might flow in terms of the timing? When are you expecting to get the money? And secondly, are you confident that you will make the June deadline for the Infrastructure Australia priority list?
The answer to the second question first is yes. And in answer to the first question, yes, we're confident we'll get the money from Tony Abbott. And I've had discussions with Tony Abbott about the funding commitment, which he's reaffirmed. The timing of that we haven't discussed, but certainly we've got confidence of that commitment, and he certainly reaffirmed that commitment. And we will meet the 30th of June deadline. Sorry? Well, we're going to start building by the end of end of 2014, and we would expect the money to be part of that construction project.
Premier Denis O'Kane, 3AW, if I can ask you two questions, seeing that Josh got three in. This morning's smash on CityLink, does that prove that we need a better road structure in Melbourne? And secondly, there are concerns that have been raised over the lowering of targets for inspectors of pubs, nightclubs, bottle shops and gaming venues. Now, according to the budget papers, the Liquor and Gambling Regulator will carry out more than 5,000 fewer compliance activities next year.
Let me answer the CityLink question first. Obviously it was a terrible accident, and we offer our best wishes to those who are injured, particularly I understand the truck driver was seriously injured, and we offer him our best. But it does highlight the need for more options and more alternatives. And certainly when you have an accident of that nature, it is going to be hard on the city. But if we have more options, more choices, more alternatives for people, then I think that we will have a better outcome. And it does highlight, like when the tunnels were closed nearly 12 months ago, it does highlight the need for that East-West Link. And certainly we are proceeding full steam ahead. With respect to inspections for gaming and liquor, I'll take that on notice and get some more details back to you. But we are determined to make sure that we have responsible gaming and liquor industries, and that we have an independent process of inspectorates that are vigorous, are thorough, and make sure that those people who are privileged enough to have a gaming licence or a liquor licence do the right thing by their customers and the people of Victoria.
Premier, James Campbell, Herald Sun, you noted that in the federal budget, their money for Melbourne Metro is back-ended into the sort of never. How does that differ greatly from the $50 million that was budgeted last year for Melbourne Metro in the state budget, of which you spent zero?
Well, the $50 million in the state budget last year was money for planning for Melbourne Metro and also for making early acquisition plans. When the work was done on that, it was determined that we needed to do some preliminary work before those acquisition overlays could be put in place. So that's why that money was deferred. The money's still there and it will be used for that purpose, but we needed to do something else first to make sure that when we use that money for acquisition overlays and other associated processes, and I hope I'm getting the words right, that that we do it on the appropriate properties and that we need. So we need to do the planning first.
So we have our students from Kilvington Grammar here today. Again.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm a student from Kilvington Grammar School, and I was wondering, Mr. Premier, if you could please tell me what progress you see for education in Victoria during your time in office.
Thank you very much, and it's good to see you here today. I think, as I said in my presentation, education I think is vitally important, and when I talked about Northern Bay College in Corio-Norlane, I think you hopefully got the context that I see, that education is the key for young people in terms of creating opportunities for their life. And we as a government are very keen to make sure that we provide those opportunities for people wherever they live in Victoria, whether they live in Manangatang or Mildura, or whether they live in Mallacoota or Orbost, or whether they live in the inner city areas. And particularly we want to provide good quality schools in areas where there are a number of vulnerable families and vulnerable children, to give those children every opportunity. So we are committed, and this year's budget we provided a record level of funding, increased funding for primary and secondary education. We're committed to try and improve education. We're also increased significantly funding for student with special needs, which is an area where I'm passionate about, and Martin Dixon, the Minister for Education, is passionate about. So we are very committed to funding education. You may be alluding to discussions with the federal government on the so-called Gonski issues. We are happy to have bilateral discussions with the federal government. Can I say they have been a bit difficult, because over the last 6 or 8 weeks, every time we've talked to the Commonwealth, we've got a new set of figures. And even in the federal budget this week, the figures moved around again. And we just find it difficult to have honest and open negotiations when the Commonwealth keep changing the goalposts. And indeed, we saw only a couple of weeks ago where the Commonwealth were proposing to fund some of the additional secondary and primary school education by taking $200 million out of Victorian universities. Well, I think that's robbing Peter to pay Paul. I think that's wrong. And similarly, they've only given us an 18-month commitment for partnership funding for kindergartens and early years. So I don't think you can take money away from kindergartens and universities to fund primary and secondary schools. That's pretty short-sighted. So we want open discussions, honest discussions, and we want the figures on the table.
Oh, sorry.
Well, that's I hope you will actually listen to what I said. The east-west versus the rail tunnel is an absolute furphy. It is wrong. We're not having one or the other. We're not prioritising one above the other. We want both. Melbourne needs both. I want both. Our government wants both. We are ready to start work on the east-west stage 1 now. Ready now. We can go to tender later this year. We can start work in December or late 2014. The Metro Rail Tunnel is still some years off in terms of the work and planning that needs to be done. So that's the time. It is the timing issue. So while some media outlets want to put it as one versus the other, they are simply wrong.
Mr Premier, my name's Paul Waldron. I'm not a journalist. I'm probably what a lot of people in this room would call in the cash for comment industry. I like to call it advertising. But you mentioned earlier about your government's contribution to healthcare, which is something I think we should all just face up to and call it sick care. You know, the money, the extra $5 billion that's going into health is going into care for sick people. And when I look at education, I've just put 4 children through the Victorian education system, and whilst they've come out with a great knowledge of trigonometry and the Russian Revolution and all sorts of wonderful facts, they've learnt precious little about how to enter into adulthood and pursue a healthy lifestyle on nutrition, diet, mindfulness. And I just fear that this 4.8 billion will need to be 14.8 billion in 10 years' time unless you and Minister Dixon do something about adding health, lifestyle, nutrition to our school curriculums.
Thank you for the question. I don't agree with the premise of your question in terms of, I mean, we are putting money into health in terms of acute health, and we're putting that at record levels because we've got an ageing community, we've got demands on the community. We're investing in hospitals and health services, but we're also investing significantly in preventive medicine, in community health, and in health promotion, and they're going right across the board. And indeed, the community health centres are a strong and viable part of our system. In terms of education in schools, there is certainly significant education in our schools on health and healthy eating and healthy lifestyles. Indeed, I was been to schools this week at Ferntree Gully, where I went in the classroom and the whole board and whiteboard and all their facilities was about fruit and vegetables and healthy eating. That's that was for preps in grade 1. It is part of the curriculum. It is part of the curriculum. That's what I'm telling you. At Ferntree Gully, they're there on the board. I also would make one final point, that we shouldn't absolve parents of their responsibilities in these areas. This idea that it should be the education system and schools that provide all education to all students on every issue, I think is simply wrong. The best teachers of students and young people is their parents and their other adult friends and relatives. And that's where the basics should come from. And so, well, if you're failing, no, but I mean, no, I'm sorry. Parental responsibility is ultimately the first line where children get their start in life. And children should get their start in life from their parents in terms of healthy eating, healthy lifestyle. And in terms of this suggestion that it's failing, again, if I happen to have done a degree in epidemiology at one stage, and if you look at epidemiologically at the performance of the human cohort over the last 150 years, our average life expectancy has gone up enormously. Our health outcomes have gone up enormously. So this idea that it's going wrong is simply not borne out by the facts. The facts are the opposite. Yes, there's more to be done. Yes, we need to do more with people. The prime responsibility is with parents. And yes, there are active programs in our education system. And yes, there are active programs in our community health sector.
Time for one more?
Yes.
Premier, we've just had news through that the federal court has ruled in favour of the CFMEU and its action against the government regarding the industrial code, and apparently Justice Bromberg has found that the state government breached the Fair Work Act in seeking to exclude Lendlease from the Bendigo Hospital project. Now, we know what's happened since then regarding land lease and the Bendigo Hospital project, but in more general terms, will the government review the code itself and its application, or would you consider scrapping it altogether?
Thank you very much for that question. There's a number of answers to the question, but the nuts and bolts are is that the decision was handed down, I believe, as we were actually in this room, or nearly in this room. I was advised just before I got up to speak that this decision has been handed down. So clearly we've had no chance to study the decision. I even understand the decision hasn't even been published in terms of its reasoning yet. So let us have a look at the decision. Let's have a look at the reasons so that before we make a considered comment on it. But in the broader sense, I'll make 2 points. Firstly, the Bendigo Hospital project is a great project that's going ahead with a very good consortium that will deliver the best investment in new health services, including community health services, in Bendigo and the northwest Victoria, which will provide enormous benefits to that region. Plus it will deliver game-changing investment in Bendigo overall in terms of new childcare centre, conference facility, retail facilities to actually revolutionise that whole city block. So that's going to be a great outcome. And second point I make is that we as a government are very concerned about the escalating cost of construction in this state. We have a major projects agenda which is significant, and we want to be able to do that in an affordable manner to the benefit of Victorian taxpayers. Also, we are concerned about militant unionism on building sites, particularly in this state, and we certainly don't want to. We want to do everything we can to moderate unreasonable union behaviour and unreasonable union demands that price us out of infrastructure. So we want to deal with those issues. We'll take on board the decision of the court, we'll evaluate the decision of the court, and we'll make further judgments after that.
Well, we pride ourselves on finishing on time, and we're just a couple of minutes after 2, so thank you very much, Premier. We're very pleased that you've agreed to come and spend some time with us early in your premiership. We hope we'll be able to welcome you many times again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.